to another episode of Did I Get What I Paid For? I'm not going to bother explaining the premise of this series. If you want to know, go watch our other 3 episodes. I'll link some of the good ones in an end card or something. Today's movie is Utopia, aka Atoll K, aka Caruso Land, starring Laurel and Hardy. A previous episode of this series covered them, so I don't really need to explain who they are. So I guess that gets us all the way to that history section that everyone hates. And this movie has, well, it has quite a history. This was the movie that made Laurel and Hardy want to give up filmmaking. In fact, it was about 4 years after making this one that they even wanted to try again. And by that point, Oliver Hardy was in no shape for it. So, what went wrong? The better question is, what didn't? This movie was a Franco-English co-production. Director Leo Joannan was attached. And, well, he had a bit of a reputation for being a perfectionist. At least in terms of meticulousness, comparisons have been made between Utopia and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, all the way down to almost driving one of his stars insane. At least Kubrick wasn't almost responsible for the death of 2 of his actors, that we know of. On top of this, Laurel, Hardy, and Joannan couldn't really communicate. Stan Laurel spoke a little bit of French, enough to say stuff like, which way to the bathroom, but not enough that if someone gave him directions, he'd be able to follow them. Joannan didn't really speak much English, which made things really difficult. Stan Laurel's diabetes meant that he really couldn't be working for more than a half hour at a time. Couple that with the whole OCD director thing, and things didn't go well. According to Ida Laurel, shooting on Utopia started on April 1st, 1950, and didn't finish until April 1st, 1951. Now, having a movie go from production to post-production in a year is pretty standard now. But this was just the production. The whole production took a year for a movie that was supposed to take 12 weeks. Because of their problems with the director, and injuries suffered by Oliver Hardy in a water scene, a new director was brought in. And shades of flying deuces, it's this new director that may have been responsible for this movie being public domain. Laurel and Hardy needed a director who spoke English and was living in France. The pool of directors was pretty limited, so they went with John Barry. There's one tiny problem. John Barry wanted to go uncredited. You see, back in his home country, the good old US of A, he was sort of persona non grata. Barry had been a member of the Communist Party in the United States before that was really a bad thing. And he had done a documentary in defense of the Hollywood 10. 2 of the infamous Hollywood 10 repaid his kindness by, well, making Barry a sacrificial lamb. When Joe McCarthy came by and asked them to name names, they gave Barry up. Like many other blacklisted directors before him, including Orson Welles, Barry went to France. Instead of making The Third Man, Barry, well, imagine the exact opposite of Carol Reed's masterpiece and you get this movie. It's time to review this movie. Come on, Jess, it's Laurel and Hardy. You can get through this, you can get through this, you can get through this. The movie starts out well. Stan and Ollie go see some lawyers. And we get one of those classic vaudevillian style introductions. It turns out Stan's uncle has died. He's left him a lot of money, a boat, and a small Pacific island. Of course, then we get another classic bit. The lawyers deduct their fees, then the taxes, then the fee for them paying the taxes, which leaves basically nothing. Laurel and Hardy go see their boat, and, well, it's a bit of a clunker. In fact, I'm surprised it doesn't sink the moment they get on it. We get a nice little scene of them trying to get the cargo aboard in the classic Laurel and Hardy fashion. When they board the ship, there's a nice foreshadowing moment involving an inflatable raft. And then, for a moment, Laurel and Hardy disappear. And then, for some unknown reason, we get a really strange and seemingly goofy subplot about this guy trying to sneak into France in a box full of monkeys. But then we find out he was born on a boat in international waters, in a boat that was registered to no country, which means he's a citizen of nowhere. I find that to be a really funny idea that could have been a basis for a movie unto itself. Probably a much better movie. Laurel and Hardy need some help getting their boat started. The captain of the boat next to them says, "Hey, we know just the guy who can help you. And he's free." And that's how Antoine, a man with no country, joins their crew. Here we are 20 minutes into the movie and things start to get going. Antoine cooks dinner. Stan's food disappears. He blames Ollie. They get into an argument. Some of Ollie's food disappears. He blames Stan. Then everyone realizes if Antoine is cooking and Stan and Ollie are below deck eating, who's piloting the ship? This becomes a problem when the boat starts, well, not working. They go up to fix the engine and, well, they Stan and Ollie it. They unfurl the sail and they find a stowaway. At least that explains where their food went. Everyone starts arguing. But then they realize their little stowaway is the only one who knows anything about operating a ship. It's just too bad he can't teach Stan and Ollie.
Come on. We can't waste all day just talking. Get that rope. Get the sail out. Go ahead. You, the fat one, get on the other side. Pull. It takes muscle to raise the sail. The fat one on the other side. All together now. Hey. Oh. Hey. Oh. Hey. Oh. Come on. Pull on it. Oh. Hey. Oh. Hey. Oh.
Now they need a new sail. And they need to dry Ollie's pants. Mr. Two Birds? Meet my friend, Mrs. One Stone. And now we get an example of Chekhov's boat. You've never heard of it? Well, that's because I just made it up. But you've heard of Chekhov's gun, right? That old saw in drama that you should never put a loaded gun on stage unless you intend to fire? Well, Chekhov's boat is a lot like that. Only it's slapstick comedy, so it really just involves putting a ship on screen and, well, sinking. They get caught in a storm and everything goes to hell. Well, actually it's a deserted atoll, but it's close enough to hell that they're on the same subway line. The guys try to figure out a way to survive. Unfortunately, the only book they have on the ship is Robinson Crusoe. But, lucky for them, that has everything they need to know. And you know, that's something that bothers me in fiction sometimes. You know, that whole having just the right book, the right song playing, to boost dramatic tension. When it's done properly, it adds a whole new dimension to the text. A great example of this is Aquaman. On the table in his father's lighthouse, it's a copy of Lovecraft's Dunwich Horror. That is a brilliant little bit of foreshadowing there. When it's not done well, it seems contrived. Guess which one this movie is? After a brief montage of the guys building a new civilization, we get this angry Italian woman arguing with her fiance, a US naval officer. What the hell? Is this even the same movie? During the ceremony, they start arguing over whether or not she should keep her job as a nightclub dancer. It gets really heated and they decide to call off the wedding. She runs off to find herself. She looks across the bay and sees this island that she's never seen before. So she decides to just swim across. She goes to introduce herself. And, well, 4 straight men on a deserted island, haven't seen a woman in 6 months at least. What do you think happens? That's right, hijinks ensue. A short time later, some surveyors come to the island. They find some uranium deposits. They want to know who was the first one off the boat so they know which country this island belongs to. It turns out the first one off the boat was Antoine. The surveyors try to trick him. They tell him any country would be glad to have him as a citizen if he signed away the mining rights of the uranium. But Ollie hits on a great idea. Have them write their own constitution. Make their own country. So they do. The laws of this new country, which they call Caruso Land but the outside world refers to as Atoll K, are as follows. 1. No violence. 2. No other laws. 3. No taxes. Somehow, this constitution is accepted by the UN like magic. Not only that, Ollie manages to get himself elected president. At this point, the movie goes from being a slapstick comedy to being an attempt at a political comedy. You know, a poor man's duck soup or mouse the roared. only it tries to show the dangers of unchecked capitalism and the failed promises of communism, which, given the background of the second director, John Barry, shouldn't be that much of a surprise. Capitalism clearly doesn't work. Communism would only work if we had a very, very small number of people and everyone was inherently good, which they're not. And this movie plays with that. After all, their constitution works fine when it's just the 5 of them. Once word gets out of no laws and no taxes, people flood in. With this influx of new people, the whole no laws thing sort of breaks down. The cabinet, by which I mean the 5 founders minus Stan, start passing some laws. Once they do that, it triggers a violent revolution. What's-her-name has to call her naval officer ex-fiancé to save them. Stan and Ollie are about to be hanged when another storm comes in. The island starts flooding. People start running for their boats. The entire atoll begins to sink. The Navy guy arrives just in the nick of time. In the end, the angry lady ends up a Lieutenant Sex's pig. They are angry at each other, but they realize that's just the way they like it. Giovanni the stowaway gets a job mending fences. Not the diplomatic kind, I mean actual fences. I won't get into what happened to poor Antoine. As for Stan and Ollie, they get to their island. But
That sure was nice of Fraser and Cherie to land us here on our own real island. Give us all this food and everything. Just like a fresh start in life.
It certainly is. And they're going to bring us new supplies every 6 months. At last, all of our troubles are over.
Yes, sir. Nothing to do from now on but eat and sleep.
And nobody to tell us what to do.
What are you doing here?
What are we doing here? Well, this is our island.
There must be some mistake. This island has been taken over by the government for insufficient payment of inheritance taxes. Moreover, you've also been fined for the delay. My duty to seize your supplies and food. Take it away.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
it is time to answer that question. Did I get what I paid for? And what can I say? Laurel and Hardy's career ends not with a bang, but a whimper. I know this wasn't the end of their careers. They took a few months off to recover from health issues that were exacerbated by the conditions of shooting the movie. And then they took a really odd step. They started doing a series of tours, live shows, across the UK. From 1941 to 1945, Laurel and Hardy made a whole bunch of movies. A lot of them didn't get to theaters in the UK. Most of that was because people either couldn't afford to go to the movies, or it was unsafe during the Blitz. While their popularity had faded in the United States, over there, they were dynamite. These tours they did sort of became an annual event from 1951 to 1954. If you saw the movie Stan and Ollie, starring Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly, which I highly recommend, you know how this goes. The tours took their toll on Oliver Hardy. Doctors of the time say Oliver Hardy might have lived a year or two longer had he not finished those last 2 tours. But if your choices are to stay at home and be miserable and live longer, or do what you love with your best friend in the world at your side, well, I can't say I blame the man. Oh, and where was I? Ah, yes, the movie. Much like the Marx Brothers before them, and the Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello a few years later, Laurel and Hardy's last movie is, well, it's not their best. Their health is failing and it shows. Stan Laurel didn't have much say in the writing process, which is a huge mistake. And I guess I feel the same way about this movie as I do the Marx Brothers movies Go West or Night in Casablanca. It's breezy, fun entertainment. If it had been a vehicle for, say, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, I would have thought this was a great movie. But I expect more of Laurel and Hardy. I won't say this movie is terrible, but I won't say that it's good. Back in episode 1, I said that in theory it'd be possible for a movie that was bad to get a passing grade. I paid 37 cents for this movie. I hate to say this, but that statement I made in episode 1, it's no longer theoretical. I guess what I'm saying is if you find this movie on archive.org, go ahead and download it. Watch it. But Don't pay the huge price that YouTube wants you to pay for it. Not worth it. Okay, credits and preview time. I'm sorry, I still don't have the Patreon stuff up. I promise I'll get to it soon. I swear this time. Well, see you around, folks.
Miss Nancy Drew from the Brynwood School for Young Ladies.
I'm very pleased
I
to meet you.
Damn it, I forgot to mention the Great Kazoo.